most people will think. Smoking only emerged a few hundred years ago, originating with the indigenous people of America. Then came the iconic image of a cowboy or European aristocrat leisurely enjoying a cigarette. Well, that is partly true, but not quite. In fact, our ancestors were smoking long before that. I mean, long before the very concepts of civilizations and language even exist. At some point, it all began with a campfire burning a tree stump, and your ancestor took a deep breath of the smoke and thought, "Damn, I'm high." But the real question is, what made them inhale that smoke in the first place? So in this video, we're going to explore when humans first discovered smoking. And here is what no one tells you. Smoking didn't begin with colonial trade or the productions of tobacco. Nor did it necessarily have anything to do with agriculture or ritual. Alright, let's start with fire. Because where there's smoke, there's fire. Fire was one of humanity's earliest discoveries, dating back more than 1 million years ago. Evidence of a controlled fire used to be found at Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa. Archaeologists found ash from burned plants and charred animal bones that provides evidence that the fire was intentionally controlled by humans. By the time we get to our ancestors, around 1 million years ago, they were not yet called Homo sapiens. Instead, they were called Homo erectus, a close relative to modern human. By comparison, Homo erectus had a smaller brains and more primitive, wild temperament. They sat around the fire, talking and cooking like Homo sapiens. They continuously inhaled smoke and exhaled for 500,000 years. They inhaled the smoke unintentionally because, of course, they were sitting close to a burning fire. Here's the interesting part. That smoke wasn't just coming from the wood. It also came from other organic materials. When certain plants are burned, they can produce psychoactive chemical compounds. For example, alkaloids and terpenes. These substances are extremely sensitive to the human nervous system. So it's fair to say that Homo erectus may have experienced the closest thing to what we now call getting high. Researchers have also pointed out several lines of evidence suggesting that our ancestors lived in the forest and were constantly exposed, often unintentionally, to chemical compounds produced by plants. For example, the cannabis plant, which plays an important role in the production of nicotine found in tobacco. Coincidentally, our brains contain a system known as endocannabinoid. It is part of the endocannabinoid system. It regulates everything from emotions and memories to appetite. What's fascinating is that when humans inhale cannabis smoke, the brain doesn't treat it as something unfamiliar. It's more like a, damn, welcome home. And that may have been the moment our ancestors accidentally took humanity's very first puff. Then, by repeating this behavior unconsciously over the course of thousands of years, someone was bound to try recreating the experience. Just think about today's trillion-dollar tobacco empires. Even rituals and traditions, from healing practices to social interactions, everything mentioned above originated from someone who was bored and wanted to get high from smoking leaves. Now let's make the distinction clear. Ancient humans accidentally smoking is one thing, but deliberately growing plants and leaves to smoke is a completely different story. Now, let's look at the evidence uncovered by archaeologists. The earliest evidence of intentional smoking dated back around 500 BC. Inside a bowl containing cannabis seed and heated stone, suggesting that someone intentionally burned it to inhale the smoke. And this bow was discovered in the Pamir mountain of Central Asia. This batch of cannabis leaf was even high quality material, not just wild plants. But this led us to the next questions. Is there any historical evidence from before this point? Because we rarely find organic materials, leaf or seed that have survived for thousands of years. We can find stone tools from millions of years ago because stone is not easily destroyed. However, a smoking pipe can disappear after only a few hundred years. This is where something known as the Herodotus problem comes in, a Greek historian from the 5th century BC. He gave detailed descriptions of the nomadic Scythians from the EU. Among them was a ritual known as a vapor bath. Basically, they would seal a tent, hit stone, and then place mysterious seed on top of them. And eventually, they would scream with pleasure inside the tent. The credibility of this discovery is relatively high for two main reasons. Herodotus was one of the very first true historians to apply professional method of investigations and documentations, rather than simply being "trust me bro" kind of claim. The second reason is that archaeologists have actually found evidence of leaf and heat stone. Next, let's talk about tobacco, because it is something that almost everyone has encountered in modern times. Tobacco is a plant native to the Americas and is the key source of nicotine. And this plant only became known to the rest of the world when colonizers arrived in the Americas in the 15th century. The earliest record described indigenous people holding a burning pipe. They would inhale the smoke from the pipe and eventually exhale it. Tobacco had existed in the Americas for a very long time before that. Archaeologists found tobacco residue and smoking pipe dating back as far as 3500 BC. The site was located in southeastern United States, and this is where the issues arise. Tobacco was extremely important during that time. Medicine, spiritually, and social communications. Blowing tobacco smoke into someone else's face was considered a sign of respect at that time. Meanwhile, priests exhaled smoke to show that they were communicating with a higher power. These explain why smoking for thousands of years was so disciplined, ritualized, and controlled. As for the casual use of tobaccos in modern times, that habit was developed by Europeans. Okay, now let's go back even further in time before the first civilizations ever appeared. In 2019, scientists made a discovery in the Great Salt Lake Desert. It was a 5,000 years old heater, and inside they found the presence of white Nicotiana essential seed. Another important point is that these seeds were gathered together in a very organized manner. This suggests that a group of people intentionally did this in order to inhale the smoke from those seeds. At this point, we have another question. Was this done for enjoyment or as part of a ritual? Throughout history, humans have always sought a way to alter their state of consciousness through methods such as drinking alcohol, consuming psychedelic mushroom, inhaling smoke, chewing leaf, and way more. In 1980, a pharmacologist named Ronald Siegels at UCLA published a study. It suggested that intoxication is one of the 4 basic human needs, alongside hunger, thirst, and sex. This led to the agreement that if the desire to get high is deeply ingrained, then we can understand why humans today are so obsessed with psychoactive substance. Finally, there is a little bit of poetry in all of this. What separates us from ancient humans is technology, medicines, and the internet. But ultimately, the desire to get high around a fire has remained unchanged all the way to the present day. It is not an exaggeration to say that the desire to get high is one of the rare things that has been passed down all the way to the present day. And when you sit around a fire and get high, remember that you are taking part in one of humanity's oldest traditions. It is breathing.